Right, so by the way, I haven't really driven this car any appreciable distance at the moment, but these are the problems, as we've been sort of led to understand from the previous owner. So first of all, apparently sometimes the shift lock release doesn't work, so it stays sort of stuck in whatever gear or park or whatever it's in, and apparently when that happens, the only way to sort of like get it into the gear you want is to use a screwdriver to release the manual override down there. So that's a problem there. Then if we start it up, you will see that it's got I don't know how clearly those lights are showing on the phone. So anyway, so we've got a check engine light. That one is just a seatbelt light, so nothing to worry about. But then we've also got the ABS light and the ETS light. So I can't remember what ETS stands for, but it's sort of like it's some kind of like skid protection or stability control, something like that. I'm pretty sure is what it is. So those are the problems showing on there. In terms of the way it drives, apparently it normally drives fine, but sometimes it can run rough. The previous owner believes that's related to when the check engine light comes on. Well, he actually said that it started running rough, then the check engine light came on and it started running better, is what he said. So maybe the car has picked up a fault on something, disabled it, gone to some sort of like pre-programmed mode instead of using a sensor. So that would make sense. So then I put the scan tool on it, and just to sort of digress a little bit, I bought this Foxwell scan tool fairly recently. I've used it on a few cars, and I've got to say I've been disappointed with it. It seems like very kind of slow and clunky and buggy. And on this car especially, it was like really slow. So I did actually start filming me sort of scanning it and going through the different modules, trying to go through the different modules and stuff using this. But it was proving so slow. I thought that's just going to make for a really slow, boring video. So I just deleted that clip. I'm not going to include it. But basically, essentially, there was a lot of codes on there, and hang on, let me just switch off the ignition, not drain the battery. There was a lot of codes on there, and I did just try deleting them all just to see what would come back, because some of them looked like they could be old codes, but most of them did come back. So there was various codes on the various modules indicating like problems communicating with the ABS module, which did make sense because when I actually directly tried to scan the ABS module, it wouldn't scan it. It couldn't find it. So it was basically not communicating with the ABS module. So basically, what I think is going on is there's obviously a problem, intermittent, I think, with either the ABS module or the wiring to it. Basically, that's my sort of feeling on what's wrong with us at the moment. Now, I did actually spend quite a bit of time yesterday evening, sort of like I was messing around in here for about over an hour, but with that thing. But after that, I did spend some further time researching online, and apparently there is actually a pretty much known kind of or well-established area where the wiring to the ABS module can chafe against the bodywork. So because of that, I think before I do anything else, I'm just going to go try and get to that point in the wiring and just do a visual inspection there. So the ABS module on these, I think, is just behind the headlight. I think to access it, I'm going to take the headlight off and maybe the wheel arch liner as well. So what I'll do is I'll go and do that, and then sort of have a quick look where we are, and then come back to you guys to bring you up to date. Okay guys, so I've done some tests at the ABS module, some of which I filmed, some of which I haven't, so we'll get back to the bits I have filmed in a minute. But first of all, let me just explain what we're doing. So we've got a wiring diagram here of the ABS module. As you can see, we should have a power or powers on pins 1 and 32 permanently, and then we should have a switch power with the ignition on pin 4. And also we should have 2 grounds on pins 16 and 47. So what I've done, as you'll see in a minute, is I've taken the ABS connector off the ABS module. Now if you're just looking at the connector, you can't see any numbers on the pins. But you can't actually see into the connector, into the terminal on the module either because of the angles. But what you can do is, if you actually just use your phone to take a picture of it, but by looking sort of sideways onto it, you can then use the picture to work out which pin is which, if you see what I mean. So that's what I've done, and I've drawn a diagram of it as well. So my pins 1, 32 and 4 are, as you can see here. So initially I've connected my test light up to battery negative, and I've tested for power at this pin 32, 1 and 4, and on all 3 of those the test light lit up nice and bright, so that showed that my powers are all good. Then I switched my test light to battery positive, and then I tested for these grounds here at pins 47 and 16, and once again my test light lit up nice and bright, so then that showed that my grounds were good as well. So basically that's our powers and grounds checks. Basically they all tested correct. So then I moved on to do checks on the CAN high and CAN low wires, and the CAN high and CAN low system, I should say, or the CAN system, I should say, I suppose. And my CAN high is pin 11, my CAN low is pin 15, but those I did film, so we'll now get back to those clips that I shot showing me testing the CAN system, if that makes sense. Okay guys, so as you can see, I'm just very lightly being careful not to spread those female terminals too far apart. I'm just very lightly probed into those 2 terminals that we talked about earlier, and as you can see, the ohmmeter is indicating 62 ohms, which is correct. That is the resistance we'd expect to see across those two CAN lines. So that first basic check verifies that those are okay. Just a couple of other things to mention. So after I just stopped filming the previous clip, I did actually just try kind of like moving all this around to see if that resistance value changed at all. And just to make sure there wasn't, because obviously this problem is kind of intermittent, so I thought, well, it could be like something opening and closing. That value did move a little bit, but not significantly. I'll just try and show you now if I can do it whilst filming at the same time. So I'm trying to be a little bit gentle because I don't want these things to fall out. I haven't got them pushed all the way in. But as you can see, that value is looking pretty stable. So just thought I'd mention that I have done that in case you were wondering about it. Just the other thing to quickly mention is when you're doing this check, everything on the car does have to be off and sleeping. So what I have done is I actually kind of switched everything off, closed the doors, the bonnet, everything, and just left the car previously for about an hour or so, just to make sure that everything's completely dead. Because if modules are awake when you're doing this test, you will get a different reading. So just to mention that. So now I've got one end of my ohmmeter on battery ground there, and then I got that's on one of the two can wire connectors there, and got a high resistance, which is what you want to see, and just to make sure the test is valid, if I take this out of here and touch it onto a ground somewhere, what can I use? Maybe the body of the ABS pump. As you can see, that drops down to a drops down to a low resistance. I'll just go, so I'll just do that again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, touching it onto there, high resistance, so that's all right. And then the other one, the other can one, whichever one it was, low or high as this one, again we got a high resistance, and just verify that if I touch onto the body of that ABS pump again, it goes low. So we haven't got any shorts to ground there on those two wires. I've got one end of the ohmmeter on battery positive there. Again, if we come back to our can lines, I'll check on the first one there, showing high resistance, and then the other one was 2, 3, 4, 5, that one, and again showing high resistance. So so basically that means oops, dropped my ohmmeter. So that means we got so we verified that the resistance between the can lines is correct. They're not shorted to ground, they're not shorted to positive. Next thing to do is just a voltage check on them. Now, ideally this check would be done with an ohmmeter, sorry, with a oscilloscope I should say, but I haven't got one, so we're just going to do an average voltage check using an ohmmeter. So for this check, the ignition does need to be on, so ignition on. I got one end of the ohmmeter on battery negative, sorry, voltmeter. I'm using it as a voltmeter now, so I should call it a voltmeter. And so, oh, I haven't got it switched on. So on the volt scale, so we'll do this one, which is, oops, sorry, you're not seeing what I'm doing, are you? So we'll do this one first, which is can low, so we should expect to see about 2.4 volts on there, and then we can see 2.37. Ignore the minus sign just because I got my leads the wrong way around, so we're happy with that. And then can high, 3, 4, 5, we want to see about 2.6 on there, and that is bang on 2.6. So so what do we know? Our powers and grounds are good, our can lines are good. We can't communicate with the thing. That's kind of making me suspect the module at the moment, but I'm going to have a bit more of a think about it, make sure I'm not making any silly mistakes, and make sure maybe think of some other tests I can do to verify it for definite. But at the moment I'm feeling like that module is going to need replacing, the ABS module. Okay, so this time I just plugged the ABS module back in. I just sort of tried to scan it again. This time it has actually read the ESP ABS module, so it's saying it's got nine codes on there. Let's see what they are. Sorry, this, as I was saying earlier, this thing's slow, so this bit's going to be a bit boring, but right. Steering angle sensor, wheel speed sensor, Okay, so those are all wheel speed sensor type codes. Control unit N47 is defective, so it's actually telling us that it's faulty. So that kind of chimes with what I was thinking earlier. So it's obviously got an intermittent fault, but it knows that it has that, it would seem. So various steering angle sensor codes. But perhaps that one there, that C1000, perhaps that's the most significant one, I'm thinking. Interestingly, I think it not coming out of park is actually linked to that ABS module as well, because I think the little module that controls the locking, the shift lock, gets this brake, the signal that confirms that you've got your foot on the brake. I think it gets that through the ABS module, I think. So at the moment we can speak to the ABS module, even though it can see us not well. It's kind of working in the sense that we can communicate with it, and also it seems to be communicating. Just seeing as like the way this problem, like, or a big part of this problem that we tackled in this video turned out, I just want to talk a bit about the way I do my battery checks. Now, you can obviously get battery testers and stuff like that, and obviously if you got like a battery tester that you've used before, that's reliable, that you're happy with using, I mean, like, obviously carry on using that. But one thing I would say about battery testers is, like, some of them are expensive, and some of the cheap ones are really crap. They're useless. They're worse than useless because they blatantly mislead you. So that's something I would say about battery testers. The technique I use myself for testing batteries is very rule of thumb, if I can put it that way, and very rough and ready technique. But I've used it and it's sort of served me well over the years. And this is a test that I do. So now assuming that the battery is correctly charged, or should be correctly charged. So let's say if the last few trips you've done in the car have been like sort of 5-10 minute trips, and let's say it's been in the winter months, you've had the heated windscreen and the heated seats and various other electrics on, then that you can't do the test. You can't test the battery under the, if that's how the car's been used, because chances are that battery hasn't been getting a chance to get charged back up properly. But assuming the last couple of trips you've done, or at least the last trip you've done, let's just say has been a sort of 20-minute, half an hour trip at least, or let's say 20 minutes at least, and you haven't had too many electrics on, so the battery under those circumstances should be fully charged. This is a test that I do. Usually I like to do it the next day, so I like to do it with the engine cold, but this is a test I do. So connect up your voltmeter to the battery. This one I've got sort of like long leads attached to it. So if you just got like just short leads attached to it, you can get somebody else to do the cranking. What's going on? That's moved a bit, didn't it? That shouldn't be happening. That's not very good. So I've got a bad connection on my leads there somewhere. Okay, so that's the sort of thing you need to watch when you're testing testing stuff. But let's assume that my leads are going to be just about okay for this test. So basically, all right. So I've got it connected up to my battery. It's reading just over 12.5 volts with just the key on the accessory position. You know, that's fine. That's like a very basic, like first check, if you like. Obviously, if at this point your battery is reading sort of like, you know, lower than this, especially if it's considerably low, if it's down near 12 already, that's indicating a problem, because obviously a healthy fully charged battery should be reading 12.6 volts. So that's the first thing to point out. Okay, but assuming you're reading like so right around about that, this is the test that I do. Okay, so I start the engine, but whilst I'm starting it, I carefully watch the reading. So okay, so I'm going to start the engine, carefully watching the reading. So I've just put the ignition on. Obviously it's gone down a little bit. Let me just put the fan off, and we're watching the reading as we're cranking. Okay, here it goes. Now, did you see, I'm sure you did, that reading went low as I was cranking? Now obviously it's normal for it to go a bit low, because obviously the starter motor like draws a lot of current, and you know that is going to pull the voltage down a bit on the battery. But the basic rule of thumb test that I use is that for me, that reading during crank should stay well over 10. Well over 10, like 10 as the absolute kind of like minimum. If it's like anything below 10, if it drops down to 9.5, 9.8 even, then for me that battery is no good. And in fact, this was the very test that I did do on this car, and it failed. It read 9.8, and you know, like I explained in the previous clips, I changed the battery, and you know, it saved me a whole load of headache, including, you know, not having to chase that crank sensor code on the engine, and more importantly, not having to replace the ABS module, which I nearly did. So that's the test I use, and also obviously once it is running, you know, it should be reading up in the 13-14 volts area, because that shows that your starter motor is starting charging the battery. You may be wondering what this thing here is. This is one of those kind of like volt gauges that you can just plug into the cigarette lighter, and I think these are a nice idea, because you can kind of like just leave it plugged in there all the time, and kind of like get into the habit of like monitoring your battery. Obviously if you are leaving it plugged in there all the time, you need to make sure that your cigarette lighter outlet is one of those which kind of like switches off when you've got the ignition switched off. This one is. So I think these are a great idea. Unfortunately, they're not very accurate. That this one tends to read a bit low, as you can see, but it's still sort of like, you know, I think these are like about 5-6 quid on eBay. So for about 5-6 quid, these I think are well worth having as well. And obviously, like voltmeters I've talked about before, you know, for round about a tenner for a basic voltmeter that works perfectly well. So well worth having, you know, like, you know, if you're interested in car repairs, you know, you need to have a voltmeter. You know, they're so useful, and you know, no doubt you would have seen me using voltmeters if you're familiar with my channel, and I think I've previously gone on previously, I think, about how good it is to have one before. But anyway, this video has gone plenty long enough. I'm going to end it there. Obviously, apologies for various blah blah blah, as I've already talked about. Nonetheless, I hope the video was interesting for you. I hope it was useful for you, and I hope you've taken away, you know, some useful tips, advice, whatever you want to call it. And I will catch you guys hopefully all on the next video, where I will try to make it a bit more concise, I promise. But anyway, in the meantime, thank you for watching.